Hey, everybody, it's good to be back. Welcome to episode 39 of the Giant Zone, where you got your co-host, Steve the Banker.
Greetings.
You have yours truly, Fly Guy Carl. It's good to be back, Steve. Missed chopping it up with you, so
Yeah,
really needed this again. So welcome back, brother.
same.
And we are joined tonight by one of our followers and a very good friend of the show from the Giants Nation podcast. We are joined by CGF, aka John. John, CGF, welcome to the show, brother. I just covered it both. It was just easier.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you guys having me on. I've been a big fan for a while. I've been checking you guys out on Twitter. I've been watching your YouTube channel. I suggest everyone, please, if you haven't done so already, please subscribe. Great stuff. CGF, just so you guys know, stands for Chicago Giants fan. And I've just been enjoying it. I've been on YouTube probably for about a year now, and I've done a couple of different things, which I'm sure I'll get to in a few minutes. But thank you guys. Thanks for having me on.
No, we appreciate you wanting to come on and spend some time with us. So let's just give everybody a little background about yourself, John. How you became a Giants fan, your podcast. You want to go ahead and plug the podcast? Go right ahead.
Sure. I grew up in New York. I grew up in Bay Ridge section of Brooklyn. I lived there for a majority of my life. And then I went away to college in upstate New York. I was a major in journalism and broadcasting. I did not wind up doing that for a living, which was funny. And then about 15 years ago, I moved out to Chicago. And, I've always been a big Giants fan since I was a kid. And the CGF means Chicago Giants fan. And I use that moniker on the Big Blue View message boards. And that's where I kind of made a name for myself. And about a year ago, I decided to start my own podcast, which I started by myself. And then the Mage reached out to me and asked me to join his show, which at the time was Clapback Sports, then became the Giants Reporter. And I worked with those guys for about 6 months. And then I just decided to do my own thing because I had my own vision of what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go with it. And that's kind of where I am now with the Giants Nation. So if you guys want to follow me, I'm CGF_NFL on Twitter. And then on YouTube, I'm the Giants Nation. So that's pretty much it,
Awesome.
Well, we wish you a lot of luck with your show. Steve and I have been at this, God, since early this year, and we know what it's like to get it going and try to develop some kind of following and just stay at it. We call it a labor of love is what we do, and we just this is our outlet. It's fun. We enjoy it, and we get along great. So that helps always.
Yeah, I hear you. It's not easy starting out on your own. I mean, I left a pretty established broadcast with the Mage and Murph. It was a tough decision, but as you said, it's not easy starting from the bottom and having to work your way up. And it's just like making connections and reaching out to people you don't know and just say, hey, I'm CGF. And they're like, who the hell are you? But, that's part of it. It's networking and it's learning from your mistakes and trying to be humble. And that's kind of where I am right now. So.
And what about on game day? Do you have any special traditions that you follow?
Oh, I generally like to not talk to anyone on game day. I try not to tweet. Sometimes
where have I heard that before?
I try not to talk to anyone. And I actually feel like it's bad luck I don't know about you guys, but I remember in 2016, I made the mistake to have my brother-in-law come over and my best friend. So we're watching the game and the Giants, of course, are being blown out by the Packers. And I'm just like fuming in the corner. And I'm just like, why did I do this? Because during those 2 Super Bowl runs in 11 and 7, I would not watch the games with anyone. Even the Super Bowls, I was in my own cocoon. So that's my game day tradition is pretty much I try to stay by myself.
Steve, awesome. We do that weekly, don't we?
Guilty as charged.
Yeah. So anyway, let's kind of get into it. I know you've got some questions and some things you want to cover, John. So why don't you go ahead and fire away with your first question, the first topic you want to discuss?
So obviously we look at the Giants right now, 6-2. I would say that majority of people before the season didn't expect that at the bye. What is your guys' take on what you've seen so far from the Giants this season throughout the first 8 games?
Steve, do you want to start with that?
Sure. So again, John, thank you so much for joining.
Sure.
Carl covered all the bases with that. We're creating a community here, and to me, community means involving everybody. So this is a pleasure having you on, and we've been following you as well. Look, I'll keep it simple. And consistent. I said prior to the season on one of our shows, there's four things I care about. I put a lot of thought into it because we had no idea where this season was going to go. This is a new staff, new front office. Everyone had high hopes, but it was like, oh, a total rebuild. And I was like, I really took a step back, put a lot of thought and said, okay, but forget about wins and losses. What are the four things that if we win 10 games or one game, it doesn't matter. Like, what do they need to accomplish? And I said, number one, is Daniel Jones our quarterback? I think most people would agree, whether they formed an opinion or not, and I'm sure all Giants fans have one way or the other, somewhere in the middle, a lot of us, our opinions are starting to change a little bit. And credit to this staff. So they didn't pick up his fifth year. We all know that. Hey, is he the guy? And for many of us, that's still not answered. We're all somewhere in the middle, and I think that's why it's such a great conversation point. Number two, modernize the offense. Self-explanatory. The wilderness years of the 70s, I think that we always hear about. This is probably as close as we got the last 2 years with Jason Garrett's offense, et cetera. So modernize the offense. Number three, for me, no matter how much we love Patrick Graham, we appreciated him. He's a gentleman. He's highly intelligent. He made the best out of what he had on that defense. For me, and I think for a lot of Giant fans, it was like, hey, install a pressure defense. Install defense. No more of this zone prevent for like 80% of the game, and let's attack. Well, they went and got the best guy at that, in my opinion, at Wink. And obviously, there's other great defensive coordinators. Not everybody's available, but I think Wink is exceeded even my own expectations, what he's been able to do, and I can only imagine what he's going to do after another draft. And then, so that's three. And then number four, I thought, well, and we're only halfway through the season, to your point, but number four, find and identify in potential impact players, and then below impact players, develop what you have already and find the B and C level players and develop them, because you need that. And if we're going to rebuild this team, you need depth, and we can't just keep going out into free agency. So for me, Daniel Jones, is he our quarterback? Well, it's amazing what they're doing with him, and that's a conversation we can have. They've absolutely modernized the offense on a team with a dearth of wide receivers is a compliment. I mean, we can have a whole conversation about that. We have been on Twitter. Install a pressure defense, and find and identify players. Well, that to me, that's one of the things I'm most excited about talking about tonight is, and I know we're going to, it's just all the players that were already on the team, the players that have been drafted, players that were undrafted that they found. So that's my takeaway. My takeaway is when I look at those four things, the fact that we're 6-2 is like in our my wildest dreams. That's like gravy. To be doing a rebuild and winning at the same time, and in a position to potentially make the playoffs if we can win a certain number of games as a wild card in all likelihood, that's crazy. It's insane. So I couldn't be happier.
Yeah. And I agree with that. I never saw 6-2 coming. Never. And and it's funny because I've been paying a lot of attention to, the media and what everybody's saying. And, you hear, well, you got, the Eagles leading the NFC East at 7-0 and Dallas on their heels at 6-2. Nobody ever mentions the Giants. And, at first it really aggravated me, but now it's just like, good, keep overlooking us. Overlook us all the way into the playoffs. But you're starting to see, we're starting to get more regional coverage now. So it's coming around. I think people still don't believe that 6-2 is for real yet. And I think a lot of people are just waiting for the bottom to drop out on this team. But again, you know what? We're 6-2. We're right in the middle of it. Didn't expect it. Year one of a rebuild. So to Steve's point, I'm thrilled about it. And that's just one of the things I'm excited about. And Steve, you know this. I said all along in the offseason, I just want to see competitive football. And nobody could tell me that we're not competitive. The two games that we lost, we could have won them both. Every game has been close, but we're in every game. And we've almost probably been losing at some point in every game. And yet here we are at 6-2. So I like seeing the competitiveness. I like seeing that the team is not quitting. I love the coaching staff. I love the way this staff is managing this team. You could just see the difference is night and day compared to what we saw last year. They're utilizing players to their strengths as opposed to saying, this is a system we're going to run, take it or leave it. You know, you either got to play or you're not going to play. So I really like the way that this coaching staff has really looked at what their talent is and tried to utilize their talent to best fit into the system. And they're making adjustments in order to do so. And that's on both sides of the ball. That's, you know, we could talk about Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley. We could talk about Wink and the defense. It's just, I love it. I love this coaching staff not being stuck on their game plan and just not deviating it. We've seen how many times this year where the Giants, you know, they're one team in the first half and they're a completely different team in the second half. So the halftime adjustments are very refreshing. I think it's much needed. And then finally, you know what, Joe Schoen. You know, I was high on him when they hired him. You know, I'm always on Twitter saying, "In Schoen we trust." You know, he's made some tough moves, but most of his moves have been spot on. You know, Kadarius Toney, look, you turned 0 production into 2 draft picks. That's a win. And then to take it a step further, he didn't give up draft picks at the trade deadline to get a high priced maybe rental or someone that's going to kill the salary cap, or force the release of somebody that maybe we can use somewhere else. So when you factor all that into one big equation here, again, and I know that I say this all the time, our hour is clearly pointing up. I love the direction that this franchise is going in. I love the product on the field, and you know, Joe Schoen's press conference just the other day, he's, you know, by the end of the season, he's going to see the 100 top rated college football players. He goes to 2 games every weekend. You know, you could see they're creating a pipeline here of young talent, young good talent that they're setting us up for long-term success here. They're doing it the right way. So I'm just thrilled with where we are right now.
No, I agree with you. And I think this fan base, because if you look at our record over the last 11, 12 so years, we've only had 1 winning season in 2016. So I think a lot of people are just not used to winning. So we have gone through some really rough patches the last couple of years. You know, we went through Ben McAdoo, and we thought that he was going to come in and follow up Coughlin's regime and be this great, you know, this great coach, and is going to be the next coming of Bill Walsh. And for 1 year, it looked like he was, and then it just all fell apart. And then Pat Sherman came in, and I felt like Pat Sherman was more of a safe pick, and he was a really good offensive mind, but from a overall coaching standpoint, he just wasn't the man. And then Joe Judge, I don't know about you guys, but I felt like when Joe Judge came in, that introductory press conference, I felt like he was going to be the next Bill Parcells. And unfortunately, I felt after a year of just seeing him and watching him operate, it was just more of an act than substance. And then obviously people after the last couple of years, you're very skeptical. You come into the season, you know, you have a new coach, Brian Daboll, who has great accolades, but we don't know how he's going to perform in New York under the pressure. And then you see Joe Schoen, who, you know, lot of good things were said about him, but New York is a whole different animal. So I will say from this point, you know, I had a little different take at the beginning of the season. I actually felt like the Giants had a lot of talent. It just was not being utilized correctly. So I predicted 9 to 11 wins. I know I was in the minority with that. Most people were predicting, I think, around 5 to 7, but I felt with the Giants schedule that they had the season coming up, I felt like there were players who were playing on contract years that needed to play well. I felt like Saquon Barkley, 2 years removed from his injury, he was going to come back and have a decent season. I felt the Giants could be competitive this year. I mean, I originally said preseason, I said those first 4 games were going to be crucial. I wanted 2-2 or better. They wound up going 3-1, and have exceeded all our wild list expectations so far. So I'm excited to see where the season goes. I know, quote unquote, we're in rebuild, but I still think there's opportunities down the line, especially this season. There's 5 winnable games in my mind coming up. You have Houston, you got Detroit, you have Washington twice, and you have Indianapolis, who isn't performing to what level we expected. So, 10, 11 wins isn't out of the question. And I'm just kind of curious from your guys' perspective, looking at the season right now, looking at where we are, at the bye 6-2, what do you think is realistic? Because I know everyone's talking about rebuild, and that's realistic. There are players that on this roster that are not going to be here in 2 or 3 years. There are areas that need to be improved, but my take, and this has always been my take, is that you play to win games, you play to get to the Super Bowl. And I got torn apart on Twitter yesterday because I was advocating for the Giants actually to make a move yesterday. And I understand, and we'll get into that probably later, I understand the other side of the coin. You don't want to trade away draft assets, and you don't want to, especially with a tight cap situation. But 6-2, not every season is going to be the same. If you don't take a chance when you can, especially with the landscape of the NFC right now and the winnable games down the line, I'd hate to be in a situation down the line, let's say in January, where one guy like a Darius Slayton drops the ball and we're second guessing. And I hate that. I don't want to second guess. I know this is a long process, but I would like to know from your guys' perspective, what do you see with this team right now? I know we're in a rebuild, but where do you see us going this season?
Carl?
I hate to say it, but a wild card is not out of the question by any stretch of the imagination. Even if we go 5-4 down the stretch, that's 11-6. That should at least get you a wild card. Again, Houston they should beat, Detroit they should beat. Washington, all right, let's say there's a split with Washington. Indianapolis, there's 4. Dallas on Thanksgiving, ooh, tall order. We'll see. But so let's say they go 4 and 5 instead of 5-4. So that's still 10-7. You're still going to be in the wild card chase at the end of the season. And again, look, to me, this is all gravy. I said, what did I say, Steve? I think 6 to 8 wins. I pretty much penciled it in at the beginning of the year. So, look, that to me, that's house money at that point. So I think I expect them to be competitive the rest of the year. I don't, blowouts are not going to be the norm. Philadelphia is playing extremely well. That's going to be a tall order, both of those games, hands down. But the way this team is playing, I'll put them up against anybody right now and say, hey, let's give it a shot. I didn't expect them to beat Green Bay in London. I didn't expect them to beat Baltimore. So at this point, the sky's the limit with this team. I see them being competitive. If it's not broken, John, don't fix it. That's pretty much my perspective. Keep doing what you're doing and just next man up. Steve?
So a couple things. I'll first answer it just data. I want to see us continue development for the rest of the season of players. And I have a long list of players that I think if I listed them, you guys would be like, oh yeah, that's right. That guy, it's crazy how and that guy, yeah, we wrote him off. There's a long list. I love it. I want to see continued development of players. I want to see continued development of the staff. Mm-hmm. This past game was the first game that I did not like any of Kafka's play calling.
Yes.
Historically, up until this point, I think most fans are like, we always get off to a terrible start. We don't score much in the first half. In fact, a lot of the games, the first half, I'm not feeling too good. And then the halftime adjustments in the second half, and it's like Kafka, woo, we love Kafka. This was my first game. And it's okay. I felt we were outcoached a little bit. Pete Carroll, I hate that guy, but he's very good. And he's got a phenomenal offensive coordinator right now. And Pete Carroll knows defense. And he's been coaching longer than anybody in the NFL. Listen, that was a very well-coached team. And we played in Seattle. It wasn't at home. Yes, the Giants went and beat Seattle not long ago with Joe Judge. And I get all that, but I think I'd like to see the staff continue to improve their play calling. Because listen, Kafka's never done this before. Daboll's a new head coach. He's never been a head coach before. So I love also the growth of our staff. I think 5 wins is absolutely doable. That would take us to 11-6, in all likelihood, a wild card playoff. I think 2 things can be true at the same time. I think it can be a rebuild, and I think you can win and even make a playoff. So let me say this. This is not baseball, ladies and gentlemen. This isn't the Florida Marlins that won 2 World Series in the last 20 years, whatever, more than 20, 1997, I forget the other year, and they absolutely tore it down. Baseball, basketball, a little bit nowadays, but with the dream, they put these dream teams together. You can win in other sports very quickly. It's one thing like Kansas City did in the last couple of years to quickly rebuild their offensive line. Historically, that didn't happen. I mean, so we're seeing units of teams get it rebuilt quickly. We can see teams pivot and go from having a really bad season, but we know maybe it was the coaching and a couple draft picks here and there and turn around. But you're not going to go from like a losing culture and a losing team to like, oh, we won a Super Bowl. It takes time. The Buffalo Bills, I say this on Twitter, and I've said this on our shows, are in year 6 of a rebuild. What are you talking about? They just got Josh Allen. Billy Beane, their coach and their GM have been there for 6 long years. It's not like Buffalo, and I know, Carl, you love Buffalo, and I agree with you. I think they're probably going to go to the Super Bowl, or they have a strong chance. But it's not like Buffalo's been an overnight. Yeah, it's only been 2 years, and man, it's 6 years. I mean, it's they've been working at this. It takes time to build a culture. So, final thoughts, Terrence. It takes time to build a culture. It takes time to learn how to win. And what I feel that they've done is they've put us on the fast track. These guys are rebuilding this team. I think Seattle and then the Dallas game early in the season exposed how we don't match up against a lot of teams in the NFL talent-wise, actually, especially at the skill positions. Yes, we have Saquon, but the cupboard's pretty bare after that. We love our rookie tight end. There's certain players, we have some foundational pieces, but we need to improve a lot of units. We need to improve our secondary. We need to improve our offensive line. I mean, I could go on and on. After Leo and Dex, there's not much on our defensive line anymore. It used to be a strength. They fast-tracked. They're winning games. They're learning how to win, and we're winning close games. Daniel Jones has 5 game-winning fourth quarter drives. You can't even believe you're saying that in the same sentence, right? I think so. Final thought. I think the difference between there's 2 or 3 teams in the league, and that's about it, that know how to build a roster, know when to cut players, know how to find talent all throughout the draft. To me, those are your 2, and now I actually put Kansas City in there as well. Mm-hmm. Your standard bearers, the Pittsburgh Steelers, and in the last 15, 20 years, the Ravens have joined that. Yes. There are no teams in the NFL. I don't care what anybody says. You can argue with me all you all want on Twitter. There are no teams in the NFL that are better at knowing when to cut a very good player and watch what happens when they leave, except for Kevin Greene. I always say he was the one that left Pittsburgh and he still was productive. There are very few that leave Pittsburgh. There are very few that leave the Ravens. They're patient. They know when to not re-sign someone for some massive they know how to find players in the middle rounds. We're like, how did they get those guys? And then they develop them, mm-hmm. and they become impact players. Kansas City now, after getting rid of Cheetah, like, oh my God, why would they let him go? Well, you know what? They're doing pretty darn good, and it's actually worked out in their favor, and they got all those draft picks. I say all that not to go on a tangent. I say all that because I don't know how far we're going to go this year. I think 2 things can be true at the same time. It is a rebuild. It's a rebuild, but we're winning too. And both things can be true at the same time. And number 2, we're not just rebuilding the team. We're rebuilding the culture. They are rebuilding the culture. I'm not part of it. They're rebuilding the culture. And that goes so much further than just what's happening this year. Ladies and gentlemen, this is about the next 5 to 10 years. And that should excite you. And that doesn't mean we're impatient. And that doesn't mean we can't win today. But this isn't baseball with a rent-a-player and you win a World Series. This takes time. And I think for me, I just want to see the continuation of that between now and the second half of the end of the season, where it's like, yeah, they continued what they started. We still won games. We ended up with an amazing season. And we also have a tremendous amount to then be excited for the following year. There's a lot of unanswered questions, though, like we talked about earlier, Daniel Jones, Saquon Barkley, and Yeah.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you guys 100%. I think even looking back in retrospect on yesterday on the trade deadline, you're not going to go out of the way and do something crazy like trade for Jerry Jeudy and give up premium draft assets when you're right. This team still needs to continue to build. And as much as me, I'm really gung ho. I want the Giants to win, get to the Super Bowl every year. But realistically, you look at the situation right now, they are doing it the right way. And they are going to build this team. It may take 2 or 3 years to have a consistent contender and a consistent winner. But that's something that this team has not had, over the last 12, 13 years since 2011. So I'm excited to see what Shane is able to do. I feel really optimistic about this coaching staff. I kind of want to keep Wink Martindale around. I call him Billy Bob Blitzer. That's my nickname for him because he's just been so impressive so far. And I guess that kind of segues into my question to you guys. Do you feel with Shane and Daboll and what they've done so far, what are your feelings on it? Do you feel like we're headed finally in the right direction?
Well, yeah, I said that before. I think, these guys, we've got the guys that are going to take us where we used to be, where we all want to see us. If you listen to Shane's press conference yesterday, one of the things I found very interesting was that the best advice that he got from Bill Parcells was play your young kids. And Daboll, he's telling Daboll, keep playing the young kids, keep throwing them out there. They're gaining experience, they're gaining confidence, and again, we are 6-2. So I that just struck such a chord with me, and that's why I said he's going to continue to develop that pipeline, and he's not going to wait with these kids. Get him in there, unless someone's just you're not going to draft somebody and then just sit Saquon Barkley, but there's going to be that blend where we're all going to contribute and they're all going to play a role. So, we had a guest on earlier in the offseason that said the Giants won the offseason when they hired Shane and Daboll. And it's proving to be true. And, can they keep this staff together before it gets vultured by other teams? We'll see. But boy, again, it starts at the top, and we got the right guy with Shane. I have no doubt in my mind we do. Steve?
Yeah, that same presser, I also watched it and listened very carefully. And it's funny, his answers to the question. First of all, the fact that he did presser, I was so happy about it. It's not my original idea. I saw the people saying it as well, because the last GM we had, I'm not going to say his name anymore. The last GM we had, he was never there to defend the coach in the good times or the bad. He was more than happy to take his shine when things were lovely. But you couldn't, I know you guys probably agree with me. You couldn't even imagine him doing this presser like, hey, guess what? The fans are probably wondering why we didn't make a move. He came out, he talked, and he was so prepared. And that reminded me of just how I felt every game with our coaching staff, is they are so prepared. And Carl, you've brought this up in multiple occasions after multiple wins, how we had a win. You and I did a show with or without a guest. It usually would come up about, hey, but do you remember at this point of the game when, Daniel Jones went down and Tyrod Taylor came in and then he got a concussion and Saquon had, and I think the word you used was like, it was seamless. Like, yes, this coaching staff is so prepared. And you could tell Daboll was ready for this. He was ready, and he was no ego. He gave up running the offense to Kafka. Yes, he's involved. Yes, he still helps design it in the offseason, but he's like, I'm the coach. And so Daboll's talked about it consistently. And then Shane talked about it the other day in the presser about how they talk every single day. So it's so important to have a coach. It's the cliche. You want a coach and a GM hired at the same time, on the same page. These guys have worked together on and off for years. There's a history there. They know each other. They know what they want in players. They know their philosophy offensively and defensively and what types of players they look for. In the offseason, Carl and I talked about that ad nauseum. We did tons of research about the guys that Shane picked when he was running pro player personnel in Miami. And Daboll was the offensive coordinator, the types of players they wanted. Charles Clay, the tight end, who ended up making a Pro Bowl, and they found him down. Like all these players, you know what I mean? So the thing that I took away from the presser that blew me away in answer to somebody's question, you could tell Shane had prepared this. He said, I have an amazing staff. All credit goes to them. And they researched this statistic. It's not something you find on NFL.com. So I'm sure people are listening or watching, or John, you may have seen this as well. He said two things after he said that Bill Parcells quote. He said, I want you all to know this. We are the number one team in the NFL to date. We have 12 players, he said, that were not on this roster at the end of August, that we either signed off of practice squads or were free agents who are now contributing, or we brought them up from our practice squad. He goes, no team in the NFL has more. Is that a function of injury? In some cases, is that a function of a guy like Austin Calitro, who had a very nice preseason, but then bombed the minute the lights turned on? Yeah, guess what? And they replaced him. They signed. So that's number one. And then number two, he said they are number 4 in the NFL in playing time by our rookies from the draft. And I don't know if he meant to include undrafted free agents as well, because there's some undrafted free agents like Tomon Fox and that are contributing as well. So he was prepared. He had that data. They spent the time, and they care enough to hold themselves accountable and say, are we doing a good enough job with our draft, with our talent evaluation, with managing the cap, with who we're so. I mean, we've said it 1,000 times that no matter how the season ends, it seems like we have the right coach and we have the right front office. To me, I don't know about you guys, but it gives me so much confidence. It's trust in Joe Schoen.
It's just a different feeling. I mean, for me, after seeing McAdoo walk in the first day in the ill-fitting suit, and and then Joe Judge, who just had that 30-minute soliloquy at that Chicago game, and then you brought it up about accountability. It's something that Gettleman did not have ever.
Right.
He was afraid of the media. He wouldn't talk to WFAN. He wouldn't talk to other beat writers. It's refreshing to me, good or bad, positive or negative. Joe Schoen is willing to come out, face the music, and talk to the media and talk to the fans. And I think that's something this team is a good sign for us going forward.
Can I add one more thing to what you just said? I'm sorry, Carl, please
Go
don't.
ahead. Go ahead.
But what you just said lit a light bulb for me, because the other thing that I probably should have said is what you're saying, that last GM was so effing condescending.
Yes.
He was so nasty to the, hey kids, what do you these are grown men and women who work hard, who are professionals. Hey kids, what do you think this is? What do you think, Little League? The way he'd go in and he had that attitude and this guy comes in and he's forming relationships with the media, and Coach Dable knows everyone by first name. We've all heard the stories in the media. He's respectful. He calls them by first name. These people have a tough job, and he's got a sometimes crappy job. And you could tell their frustration having to answer some of these questions. And sometimes the questions are stupid and redundant, and it's ridiculous. But it's a relationship. And the reason I say all that is because he's doing the same thing with. And Dable talks about it all the time in pressers, in Giants.com interviews. They're forming relationships with players, with the kitchen staff, with the front office, with everybody. Everything is about real. So, we needed an adulting room. That's why I hired this guy. We need people to understand how to build relationships. Yeah. And so that's why when they traded Kadarius Toney, man, if they couldn't make it work with this kid, you know what, Andy Reid, maybe that's what you do. Maybe that's what you do and you're good at it. And we got a 3rd and a 6th round pick for it. So be it. I'm heartbroken in some ways, not quite like I was when Odell didn't work out, but I really thought, we watched Kadarius Toney down here, University of Florida, and it's like, man, the guy was just, I can't think of anyone in the NFL who has his physical talent, his ability to stop, start in such short space. Like I joked with somebody earlier today. I said, he's going to break his own ankles the way he moves. Like, it's unbelievable. But Carl, to your point, the kid doesn't play. So for them, they understand relationships and they understand what it's going to take to build a winning culture. So, yeah.
Here's what I like to echo some of the thoughts you guys put out there. It's respect. With our last GM, it was him and then everybody else. Coaches, players, media, there's none of that here. It's, hey, we're growing this together and we're doing our job. You guys are trying to do a job. So let's do our jobs together. I was raised by a man. God rest my father's soul, the very first lesson he taught me was about respect. And if you
You're
want
gonna
to
get
get it,
emotional,
you
Carl.
got to
You're
give
gonna get
respect.
emotional. You're gonna get
Yeah,
emotional.
I'm getting a little verklempt here. But yeah, he, the first lesson he taught me was, hey, if you want respect, you got to give respect. And you see that with these guys. So I think the respect is used here. When you listen to Daboll, his press conferences after a game, win, loss, whatever, he's very even keeled. I like that. He's in control of his emotions. He's in control. It's not too big for him. You saw early on with Joe Judge, it was too big for him, and he fought that for 2 years. You don't see that with Daboll. This is a job to Daboll. He's doing what he's paid to do. And that resonates through that entire locker room, you know. And then the third point that I really want to make, and I've said this a couple times, and I really love this. As an look, I coached youth sports, but still I coached, okay? I love after these games that the players are seeking out Brian Daboll to high five him and hug him. When was the last Giant coach that we saw do that with players?
Coughlin.
Right? And if you remember,
but that took a while. That took a while.
So Coughlin almost had a mutiny, and the leadership brought it to his attention. And the leadership, I mean, were the veterans, the leadership committee in the locker room, and said, "You're losing this locker room. You got to change your ways." And he did it, and then he won a Super Bowl. So it's just this is, and I look, it's never going to come out, but I really, really think that was part of the problem with Kadarius Toney, where Kadarius Toney wasn't buying into the whole. I think he was just, and I'm speculating, so this is just me. People, don't attack me. I'm allowed to have my opinion. I just don't think he was a fit. Maybe personality-wise, I think there was more to it than just the hamstring injury. I honestly do. I don't want to. I'm going to stop short of saying he was a cancer in the locker room, but I don't think he fit the mold and the vibe that they're trying to bring through. And then the last thing I'm going to say is I was watching an interview on TV, and David Tyree was on. And look, David Tyree was very well respected by his teammates. He was quietly very well respected by his teammates. And when he played and Gettleman was with the Giants, they asked him what it was like, and Tyree came out and said there was no relationship with that man in the locker room. Like he didn't want to talk to them. You work for me, take it or leave it. And again, these guys are human beings. These guys are, look, they're all well paid, but they're getting beat up week in and week out. The least you could do is show them some respect and appreciation. I keep going back to that word respect. You treat these guys with respect and you make them feel appreciated, and they will move mountains for you. And I love what this coaching staff and this leadership is putting out to these players and how the players are responding to it.
No, I agree with you. Agree with you guys 100%. I think it is a respect-driven league. I think we see every week that rapport between Daboll and the players is just growing, and it's really refreshing to see, because I think in any walk of life you have to have that level of respect. You have to be able to respect, your superior, or if you're a subordinate, you got to have that respect. So it's really good to see, and I honestly think it's just the beginning. And Toney, I mean, I feel bad because I feel like he is a special player when he's on the field. I mean, the game against New Orleans last year and the game against the Cowboys, man, he looked amazing. But it's more than just talent. It's sometimes it's about fit, and if he's not going to fit in this scheme going forward and in the general theme, he's going to have to move on. So,
what else do you have for us, John?
So I guess the big hot button question in everyone's mind, and I wasn't going to bring it up, is Daniel Jones. What you've seen, I know, and I feel like it is such a polarizing. It's a polarizing question. It's a polarizing figure in the Giants fan base, probably more so than anyone in the last 10, 15 years in New York sports. I guess I want to ask each of you guys, from what you've seen so far this year, do you believe that Daniel Jones has earned enough to come back?
Steve, go ahead.
Not yet. Shane basically said as much in the presser, as far as I'm concerned, because they kind of asked him that, and he said, well, we still have the rest of the season. I think Daboll is very probably subjective. That's my take. He's gut and feel and the scheme and how are they fitting. And I get the sense that Shane, and I could be way off base. Again, Carl, this is just my take. I get the sense that Shane is very analytical and rational, and he's looking at things as, hey, this is, and he said it in the presser, we got to take the long-term view. This isn't about just the next X amount of games. Yes, the next amount of games are huge and important, and we want to win every one of them, but this is about the future. I think Daniel Jones needs to prove a couple of things. Can he play full season? He's never played a full season. If he doesn't play a full season and he gets hurt again, does that mean they're not going to resign him? No, but I think they're going to be very rational and take all that into account. Is he going to continue to improve? He's steadily improved. He's not turning the ball over. He's making great decisions, 5 game-winning drives. He's been tough, smart, dependable, just like they want. He's become one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL at the play action. He wasn't in the past. He put the work in. He's learned how to fake that handoff, and it's serving him very well in the RPO, and we've seen in the bootlegs that he's run when they call it. And then lastly, I think they're going to look at it very rationally and say, what are our options? And I think that's where fans need to understand, just because we don't, well, he's not ever going to win a Super Bowl. Okay. I don't know that he'll ever win a Super Bowl, but there's not a lot of Josh Allen's falling out of the tree. There's not a lot of Justin Herbert's. Oh, I'll get somebody in the draft. Who?
Yeah, exactly.
Like who? Maybe they'll fall in love with someone and pick him in the second or third round. Like Russell Wilson was picked in the second round, and Jimmy Garoppolo was not a first round pick. And the kid in Seattle who just beat us, it took him 10 years, but he was a second round pick out of West Virginia. You don't have to find a quarterback in the first round. Bailey Zappi just won a couple games for New England as a backup. He's
Tom Brady.
Yeah, the most famous of all. But I guess my point is, it's not to say that, again, as I like to say, two things can't be true. Maybe they sign him for 2 years with a third-year voidable option to make salary cap hit less. He's your starter again, and then they get a young quarterback who needs to sit for 2 years, like Malik Willis at Tennessee, Carl, which was a big point of debate this past offseason. So they might find a diamond in the rough because they're so good at talent evaluation and scouting. We've seen that in just one draft. But maybe you do re-sign Daniel, and in the meantime, you continue building that foundation, and it's a team-friendly salary cap hit. Anyway, that's my thoughts.
So, interesting question. And I'm going to also go back to Shane's presser yesterday, where he said they haven't really done their evaluation yet to see if they extend people, who's coming back, who's not. They're going to use this bye to start doing that process. So they're still analyzing all this. Given that, right now, the way things look, the Giants are not going to be drafting high enough to get that franchise quarterback, those 1, 2, maybe top 3 quarterbacks in the draft this year. They're not. Unless Shane falls in love with one and wants to package some picks, which I don't see happening. Again, he's come right out and said he's got a long-term plan for this franchise. So I don't see that happening. Steve, to your point, he's been sacked 25 times already this year, but he's playing. He's not, thankfully look, he had the ankle injury, didn't miss a game, and he came back against Green Bay and played a great game. So, he's proving a lot. I don't think he's won that extension yet. I don't, I agree with Steve. I think if he continues along this path, it's more than likely that he's going to come back. I honestly do. Now, I think another thing of importance to look at is if he does get hurt, how does the team play with another quarterback? if they just get if you look at it and the offense gets bogged down, where you're getting 3 and outs and you know, under 200 yards a game, not from the quarterback but overall, that actually I think works in Daniel Jones' favor. Okay, but there's and then you got, well, what do you do about Saquon Barkley as well? So what I think may wind up happening here is, given where they're probably going to draft, and I actually think from what I've seen, and again, I'm like Steve, I don't know. I'm going by what I see and just what goes through my weird head, is I think Daboll actually likes Daniel Jones. You see that interaction. I think he respects him. I think he feels he's got somebody he can work with. I think he likes his toughness. He's really stepped up more. Again, to Steve's point, he's cut down his turnovers. He's making better decisions. And again, he adds another dimension with his legs. Not that any other quarterback cannot. But my point is, I think it's looking more and more favorable that he's coming back. And then the question is, all right, well, what do you do with the two of them at the end of the year? The way I see it playing out is, given their positions, you sign Daniel Jones to some kind of contract and you franchise Saquon, given the running back position. That's how I see this playing out.
No, I agree with you. And full disclosure, I was one of the biggest Daniel Jones supporters prior to the draft. When I was on the Big Blue View message boards, I was a big fan of him, a big proponent of him. My take on Daniel Jones is this: I've seen a growth from the first season to now. I've seen him cut down on the turnovers. I've seen the pocket awareness, something that the first and second season I saw from him, that he could not tell when he's being pressured. He had horrible pocket awareness. His pocket awareness has improved exponentially since then. But I do have some concerns. And I love the fact that he's had 5 game-winning drives this season. I love the fact that he's had big plays on third down, and he's led us down the field when we needed him to. But you look at his statistics through the first 8 games of the season, he hasn't passed for more than 220 yards. Has 6 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. As much as I hate to say it, this is a stat-driven league. And people, when they look at giving a big financial investment to a quarterback, they look at the numbers. They look at can this guy throw 30 touchdowns or more in a season? Can he throw for 4,000 yards? And, you know, except for that first season, I mean, he hasn't really put up the numbers. Now, I do agree with you. I do believe he's going to come back. I think he's going to come back on a team-friendly deal. I think that's going to be the best option for Daniel Jones, because I think if he does leave the Giants, I don't think he's going to get a big deal somewhere else. I think that Daboll does like him. I think he's been impressed with his work ethic. I mean, even today, I heard that Shane talking about how he's a gym rat. When he comes in, you know, he's first one in, last one out. I mean, that's what you want to see from your franchise quarterback. And all the intangibles, he's very much respected in the locker room, and you want to see that from your franchise quarterback. Since I lived in Chicago during the time when Jay Cutler was quarterback. And I can tell you, I know a franchise quarterback. I know when there isn't a franchise quarterback, who's basically in the NFC Championship game back in 2000, I think it was 2010, where he was on the sideline. He wouldn't come in, you know, because of it. It was questioned at the time, was his desire more with the team or was it with himself? And I feel like Daniel Jones is a team player, and I think he wants to succeed. And I think going forward, that's what you want as a quarterback. The question for me is it more of a byproduct of not having that talent at the wide receiver position, not having those horses on the offensive line? You know, we've seen so far this year with an improved offensive line, he has functioned much better. You know, Evan Neal, while he was in there, even though he went through some early struggles, he's looked pretty good. I think he's not, except for the Dallas game, he hasn't been running, quote unquote, for his life. So I'm interested to see how the last part of the season goes on. I really do hope he comes back, because I've liked the progress I've seen from him, but sometimes you have to separate yourself from an emotional perspective. And I am a little emotional when it comes to Daniel Jones, because I, you know, was a big supporter of him. So at the end of the day, whatever's best for the New York Football Giants, I will accept. If it means Daniel Jones doesn't come back and we draft another quarterback or we go a free agent route, that's cool. But I think he has the intangibles, and he has the skills, and he has the physical ability to be that franchise quarterback. Now the question is that what Shane and Daboll think?
John, let me ask you a question because in your analogy, you mentioned this is a stats-driven league. Okay, and it is. I understand that. But do you get the sense, I'm not going to say Mara, but do you think Shane, sorry, I did it again, Steve. Do you think Shane and even Dable, because I'm sure Dable is going to be involved in that decision as well. Do you think that they're looking at it and say, all right, he's, averaging 177 yards per game, throwing the ball, all right? 2 touchdowns a game. Okay, great. But look what he's throwing to.
Well, I think you got to.
I guess my question to you, and I don't mean to interrupt you, is how much of that is going to impact the decision, do you think?
It depends on what we don't know, because here's something I don't know, you don't know, is are they purposely game planning him to throw 200 yards a game? Are they focusing more on a run intensive offense? Because if that's the case, if they do realize those deficiencies, if they look at the fact that we don't have those weapons on the outside and we don't have that number one wide receiver, maybe, and I'm not in the meetings. I don't know what Kafka and Dable are game planning every week. Maybe they want to focus on the running game. Maybe that is this season. And maybe that's why his numbers are lower than what you would expect them to be at this point. That could be the case. You look at a guy like we were talking a little bit about before, Geno Smith, who has, I think, easily has over 2,000 yards by now, has over 12, 13 touchdowns. That's a byproduct of having Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. So, I think there's two sides of the coin, and that's the other, from me trying to be fair. He doesn't have DK Metcalf. He doesn't have Tyler Lockett. He has Darius Slayton.
James.
Yes. So, I mean,
let me give you guys really, really, really quick, I promise, because I've put some thought into it. Food for thought. One, we won a Super Bowl with a 3rd round pick. Who was it? Anybody?
Was it Manningham?
No, we won a Super Bowl with a quarterback that was a 3rd round pick. Who was it?
Hostetler?
One of our greatest drafts ever, 1984. We had Phil Simms coming off 1983 when he finally showed something. It's like, why would we draft a quarterback? And a 3rd round pick is valuable, George Young. Why would you do that? We had Carl Banks, that draft, William Roberts. It was an amazing draft for the Giants, one of the best drafts ever. Some people think the greatest. Why would you do that? I'm just saying, you can get a quarterback. I'm not saying I want them to pick one in the 3rd, because that's a tough, but I think we have 2 3rd round picks this year. I could see them re-signing him and finding a quarterback in the middle rounds. It's not threatening to Daniel. Number 2, real quick, you get rid of Daniel Jones and you have a rookie or you have a backup. We like Tyrod Taylor, but he can't even stay healthy. Here's the problem with that. That could be poison to the locker room, because we've actually seen it around the league, and we've seen it historically. When you are sending the message to your team that you don't really you're not giving the team the chance to win. And granted, the Seahawks got lucky with Geno Smith because they thought Drew Lock was going to win that job. Mm-hmm. It's not sending the right message, especially when you're trying to change the culture. Now you're talking out of both sides of your mouth. You're saying, "Oh no, we're changing the culture. We're learning to win." Yeah, and the players aren't stupid. They know who can play and who can't play. That's what they always say in the NFL. The players know. And you're going to put this guy is going to be our quarterback. Doesn't really send the right message either. So, and then look at San Francisco. Oh, Trey Lance traded the farm. Trey Lance, he's done nothing except get injured. Mm-hmm. All he's shown is that he wasn't ready for prime time. And thank God for them, they got Garoppolo, who knows what he's doing. Mm-hmm. I'm just saying I think the story is yet to be told. We still have to see the rest of the season, like you guys have both said. But I don't think it's as cookie cutter either as people think. I think that there's a lot of ways this could go. And re-signing him doesn't mean we're like, oh, now we're committed to Daniel Jones. Yes, no. Let's see how it plays out. Bill Parcells, I think, was the one who said years ago, and we've heard it before, if you have 2 quarterbacks, you don't have a quarterback. They're going to be careful. They're not going to not name a starter. They're going to, if they re-sign Daniel, if they do, and he would have, and who knows if he wants to say, and if the agent and the money is right, just because they re-sign doesn't mean they still can't take a Malik Willis, somebody else in the 3rd round, 2nd, 3rd, 4th.
Yeah, I mean, you can look at the KC model, or you can look at the Green Bay model. You know, you saw Pat Mahomes was drafted. He sat behind Alex Smith for a year or two, and then you had, obviously, in Green Bay, you had Favre and Rodgers. Rodgers sat on the bench for what, 2 years until he took over. So, I mean, that might be the most prudent thing to do for the Giants right now, is to bring Jones back on a 2 to 3 year deal,
Exactly.
team friendly, and try to develop someone on the side, and then eventually, if it doesn't work out with Jones, you move on to that quarterback.
And I'll tell you one other thing, and then I'll shush. The thing that's so important too, don't forget, while all that is happening, if it plays out that way, if that's a big if,
Mhm.
they're continuing to stockpile talent.
Yes.
They've shown an ability so far in just one season that they know how to draft. And remember, we did it when we had Kerry Collins. We went to the Super Bowl, and then Ernie fell in love with Eli. Teams around the league have been doing that. They build the foundation, and then San Diego finally gets a Justin Herbert. There could be a guy in 2 years or 3 years that we get. And in the meantime, Kansas City did it with Alex Smith. Kansas City built an excellent foundation of a team. Alex, good luck, go to Washington. What did they do? And then they got Patrick Mahomes.
Right.
They traded up and got Patrick. So wait until you find that one player that you fall in love with. And you might fall in love with them in the second or third round even.
You know, Steve, you said the key word, which is what I've been saying all year about this season. Rebuild the foundation. Rebuild the foundation from the inside out. And exactly what they're doing, and it's proving to be valuable. Very quickly, guys, where do you think quarterback rating? Where do you think Daniel Jones is in the NFL?
Right now, I think
Don't look at your computer. Just
I'm not looking at, I don't have any numbers in front of me, but I would say right now it's about 70.
no, not what is
QBR.
Where in the league
Oh, how would you rank him?
Last week, I think he was like
based on
top
rating?
10 last week.
Steve, what do you think?
I think he's definitely top 15. I think if people say, the problem with saying he's a top 10 type of caliber quarterback is you can't, because he doesn't have the weapons. It's the chicken or the egg. We don't have the weapons. Okay, but who's to say what he would do if he had the weapons? It's not fair to the guys that are having great years, like a Geno Smith, who, I'm sorry, he was mobile this past weekend. He did to us what Daniel usually does to other teams. He gave us fits. He threw gorgeous balls. He did what Danny Dimes does. You know what? I was shocked. Like those balls he threw to TJ Lockett, I was like, oh my God, those are gorgeous.
Yeah.
Should have been 2 touchdowns, not one. I mean, he was phenomenal. Like, so, and you got what Kirk Cousins is doing. And then, of course, all the great quarterbacks in the league. And so I can't put him in the top 10. That would be bias for me. But I think he's a top 15.
He's 18.
Okay.
And Kirk Cousins is 16. So he's pretty much middle of the pack.
Yeah.
But how's that ranked by QBR?
I have it by rating. I have it sorted by rating. If I do QBR, he is
Pretty high up, actually, I would think.
11.
I think his
So-
PFF rating was around 70, and it's been going up every week. I think it was in the 50s like 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, his rating is 88. So, I mean, you know, he's not far off from middle of the pack, top 15, Steve, to your point. I don't think he's going to get the top 10, but still, you know, he's right there. And guys, again, we're 6-2.
Yeah, and he doesn't have anybody to throw to.
I'll give you where this team has been successful from before the season started till now. Before the season started, I couldn't name more than 2 foundational pieces. Truly, like, we didn't know about Saquon. Oh yeah, no, we knew dude, really? Like, okay,
You know what they were getting out of Saquon this year.
Nobody knew that Saquon. I mean, we all hoped, we all figured, we all said, oh, 2 years from an ACL, but nobody really knew.
Right.
Okay, but like Dexter,
Oof.
he's taken that jump, man. Adoree, he's a top 10. Now, he got burned this past weekend for the first time. They say they saw stuff on tape, but like, I'm just saying, we have some pieces. We drafted Thibodeau and Evan Neal and Andrew Thomas. PFF, he's the best left tackle in football. I think Trent Williams is still better in San Francisco when he's healthy because he's been injured. He's the best left tackle in football. But I know that's sacrilege to say, but he's the definition of a left tackle in the NFL. But Andrew Thomas should be all pro. He's playing like the best left tackle in football. So we now have foundational, and everybody knew like Andrew Thomas had a good year last year. He's finally fixed some things, but I don't know. They got to resign him. Like we have 5 or 6 foundational pieces, and you couldn't say that going into the season.
Right.
So I think that's also the sign of improvement for this team.
Who do you think leads the Giants in tackles? I'll end it with this question. Who do you think leads the Giants in tackles?
Isn't it Love?
Bingo. Very good, John.
Another guy that they have to resign.
Yes. But again, another guy that this regime has put in a position to be successful. Not just, hey, you're a cornerback or you're a safety and you got to make it work. Wink's got him all over the field. He's got him up in the box. He's got him in coverage. He's got him blitzing. And Love has come out and said, I love this defense. So, hey, John, great job tonight, man. This was fantastic.
Thank you. I appreciate you guys having me on. I really, it was a lot of fun. Thank you very much.
You know, we appreciate the time. Best of luck with your podcast as well. Keep in touch, brother.
Oh, I will. Thank you.
Steve, always a good job, my friend.
You as well. Good
Thank
to catch up.
Talk soon, guys.